Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the new Health Minister has stated that it's okay for a human being to present as a llama. So what I want to know is, if I have a family member who presents as a llama, suddenly becomes ill in the middle of the night, do they send for a doctor, a vet, or a straitjacket?
Mr. Speaker, I can just say to the honourable member that my honourable friend, the Minister for Public Health, believes in treating every human being with the dignity and respect they deserve, even the honourable gentleman.
All right, folks. Let's talk about the absolute circus that is British politics right now. So, the new Health Minister has come out saying it's perfectly fine to identify as whatever you like, including, apparently, a llama. And people wonder why kids are leaving school more confused than ever. We're not just talking about gender identity anymore, we're in full-blown barnyard territory. How did we get here? How do we reach a point where government officials think it's totally normal to tell children that they can be llamas and cats and dogs and God knows what else? It's like we're living in an episode of 64 Zoo Lane, but it's real life. Meanwhile, surprise, surprise, loyalty to Britain is at an all-time low. This week, a report found that only 11% of people would actually fight for the country, mostly because most think it's racist. And where do you think they get this nonsense from? It's coming from the schools. Kids are being spoon-fed this distorted version of history where Britain was somehow the worst country in the world, single-handedly responsible for all human suffering. Never mind the fact that Britain, at the height of its power, was one of the main forces in abolishing slavery. That part doesn't fit their agenda, so it's convenient that they leave it out. Instead, we get lesson plans that paint Winston Churchill as some kind of supervillain while rewriting history to fit a political agenda. And then there's Lee Anderson, just an absolute comedy gold genius. But the real joke here is the absolute state of our politicians. Case in point, Andrew Gwynn. Where do we start with Andrew Gwynn? Right, he just got exposed in his WhatsApp group for the messages. This guy is literally the human embodiment of I don't care about my voters that are beneath me. This guy is caught calling people thick, making anti-Semitic remarks and making jokes about people being hit by a lorry just because they had issues with cycling lanes. Imagine the sheer contempt you'd had to feel for the public to think that's acceptable and then post them in your WhatsApp group. But as long as the paychecks keep rolling in it. Oh, and his messages about Angela Rayner. He shared a parody post mocking her for claiming £249 on expenses for wireless headphones, which read, I don't see what the problem is. It's literally impossible to give a blowjob while wearing wired headphones. Anyone with a similar background to Angela would understand. Now, love or hate Angela, but that's just pure snobbery at its finest. The same people who pretend to champion working class voices are the first to sneer down at them the moment they step out of line. But let's not celebrate too soon. Andrew Gwynn is gone, but in true political fashion, he's just been replaced by another absolute clown, the Health Minister, who seems fully convinced that kids should be allowed to identify as llamas. And we wondered why kids today don't know who they are or what they stand for. Instead of teaching them real-world skills, schools are too busy teaching them that they can be whatever animal their heart desires. It's just utter madness. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer continues his reign of robotic lying leadership. One of his own councillors, Steve Edwards, wrote an open letter criticising him. What do you think happened? He got booted. That's Starmer for you. If you dare question him, you're out. The man silences dissent faster than a dodgy Tory claiming expenses. And yet he constantly talks about integrity and fairness. Funny how that works, isn't it? And let's be real, who's actually trying to cancel people these days? Who's calling for journalists, politicians and even random citizens to be locked up for saying the wrong thing? It's not people in the centre, not people on the right. It's always people on the left. They've convinced themselves that they're morally superior, But the moment someone disagrees, out come the pitchforks. Back to Steve Edwards. He made it clear that working class Labour voters are done with Starmer, writing this. The overwhelming message on the doorstep was anti-Starmer. He has attacked working class families, our children and our grandparents. He lied to us all to get elected and does not deserve to lead the Labour Party. Now, me personally, I might not support Labour's policies, but even I can see the problem here. Edwards spoke out and Starmer immediately got rid of him. What kind of democracy is that? We're supposed to have free speech in this country, but apparently that only applies if you're parroting Labour HQ's official talking points. But here's the good news. These old scare tactics ain't working anymore. People are sick of being called far right just for wanting border control. They don't care about being labelled racist anymore just for questioning government policies. The insults have lost their sting and that's why they're panicking. And then of course we have Keir Starmer himself, a man so painfully out of touch that he once told an interviewer, "We've all used an hairdryer on a damp wall." No, Keir. No, we haven't. The man is so desperate to be relatable that he keeps tripping over his own nonsense. Every time he tries to sound like he understands working class Britain, he ends up proving he doesn't have a clue. His whole "I'm working class because my dad was a toolmaker" act. Let's be honest, the only tool his dad has ever made was Keir Starmer. And on that note, I'll leave you with this thought. The next time a politician tells you what's normal, just remember, we live in a country where a government minister thinks it's fine for kids to identify as llamas. What a time to be alive. Right folks, if you've liked that, had a bit of a laugh, enjoyed what you've heard, please like, comment and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next one folks.